She was always represented with two raised hands, symbolizing epiphany, deity, and prayer. The poppy in Cretan and later Minoan times was a symbol of the deepest sleep, most likely because scholars an allusion to death. Poppies were used in Greco-Roman mythology as an offering to the dead. The dark center of the flowers signified death, with the bright red color surrounding the black center, symbolizing the hope of resurrection. In ancient Persian literature, the red poppy is a symbol of eternal love. In classic and modern-day Persian poetry, the poppy is a symbol of people who have died for love. And in Urdu literature, red poppies, or gule lale, are the symbol of martyrdom. In modern day, the red poppy has become a symbol of wartime remembrance. Despite the extensive warfare during World War I, red poppies bloomed around between trench lines, and what was commonly termed no man's land was ablaze with the fiery red poppies on the Western Front. This inspired the poem Flanders Field by Colonel Lieutenant John McCrae, who spoke for the poppies, proclaiming, "We are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow. Loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields." It is very fitting, then, that in the United Kingdom, Australia, South Africa, Canada, Malta, and in New Zealand, that the red poppy is born on Remembrance Day, a day of honoring those who have lost their lives in battle. In the United States, the tradition of wearing a red poppy started in 1924 as a way of remembering our lost soldiers. And of course, in Southern California, we cannot talk about poppies without mentioning that the California poppy is the state flower of California. It is with this rich historic symbolism in mind that resident artistic genius Edith Balayan of the Cultural Affairs Division of Ararat, in collaboration with his team and the Ararat Board, chose the red poppy as the theme of this year's Armenian Genocide commemoration. What better way to commemorate the 1.5 million lives lost than with the symbol of life blooming in the face of death? What better way to overcome the campaign of denial conducted by Turkey than by gathering to commemorate the enormous spirit needed to survive not only the genocide, but its denial in the past century. Now in our 99th year since the Armenian Genocide, the Armenian spirit has not been weakened, it has thrived. The symbol of resurrection is one of living beyond death. Our ancestors perished in the treacherous desert of Deir Zor, but in the no man's land between genocide and recognition, Armenians have blossomed in this world. We not only survive, we thrive. With that introduction, it is my honor to introduce the facilitator for the Red Poppy commemoration, the embodiment of a thriving Armenian in the US, the illustrious David George Gevorkian. Thank you.
Illustrious. Glitter on me or something? Thank you for the warm introduction. Ողջույն հայրենակիցներ, շնորհակալություն, որ մեզ հետ միասին գտնվում եք այս պատմական միջոցառումին, որը կոչվում է Կարմիր Կակաչ. I welcome each and every one of you to this historic event called the Red Poppy. This has been a project that has stemmed from being merely an idea, and I am very happy to see so many participants, the individuals who have put in their time to serve as our panel members, to each and every one of you for being part of this evening. I'd like to begin the forum with a couple of brief questions because we want this to be an interactive forum. We want to engage and welcome the participation of each and every one of you. And along the way, after the panelists have spoken and presented their discourse, everybody will have an opportunity to provide questions or comments, hopefully very briefly, for the sake of time, but you will have an opportunity to ask questions to the entire panel or to to a specific panel member, anything that you are interested about regarding the Armenian Genocide or any of the discourse that they present. Before we begin, I'd like to know, is there anyone here who lives outside of the city of Glendale? Sir, which city?
Tahanga.
Tahanga. Yes, ma'am. Where, I'm sorry? Van Nuys? Burbank.
Hollywood.
Hollywood. Wonderful. Well, I'm very glad to see a very diverse group of people here. But interestingly, we are all part of the Los Angeles County, which is among the largest counties in the entire United States. It is a concentration of different communities and diverse communities and different municipalities encompassed in one region and in one area. Having said that, the city of Arcadia, the city of Alhambra, city of Burbank, city of Duarte, city of El Monte, which has over 113,000 people in its population, the city of Glendale, which is at 191,000, blocking out of Flint Ridge. We have Monrovia, Montebello at 62,000, Pasadena at 137,000 people, Rosemead, San Gabriel, San Marino, Sierra Madre, South Pasadena at 25,000, Temple City at 35,000, Bradbury, South El Monte, Azusa, Covina, West Covina at 106,000, Irwindale, Beverly Hills at 34, and West Hollywood at 34,400 people. The significance of these cities and their populations is that they are the largest 24 cities in Los Angeles County with respect to their population. However, their combined population only equates to less than 1.3 million. And the total number of people who were exterminated in the Armenian genocide is 1.5 million. So this evening, I'd like you to also reflect on the cities and the streets that you live your daily lives in, the homes that you go to and the neighbors that you say hello to in the mornings. Imagine if each and every one of these cities, through the course of a few events, in a matter of weeks or a matter of a couple of years, were turned into ghost towns because of many issues, including political, discrimination, segregation, religion, ideology, and hatred. Imagine these significant cities, all of a sudden, everybody just disappears. Now, it is difficult to be able to conceptualize this. And the question that arises is, have each and every one of us in our own lives ever seen 1.5 million people? Doesn't even have to be in one location. Throughout our entire lives, I assure you, I would probably never see 1.5 million individual people. And this is merely the total count of how many Armenians were killed during the Armenian genocide. And before we move forward, I would like to briefly introduce our panelists and why they are accredited to serve as reliable sources for this discussion and to make this presentation to our respectable audience. First, I would like to introduce Mr. Georg Nazarian, who is a Near East Studies historian with the University of UCLA. I would like to introduce Ms. Barbara Mulvaney, who has worked for the LA District Attorney's Office. The Attorney General in Miami, Florida, who has worked for the United Nations and has been the head prosecutor of the military leaders of the Rwandan genocide. Barbara, you just got back from Rwanda, correct?
It was an international conference commemorating the 20th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide.
We'll commemorate you for your work.
Thank you.
And Mr. Anthony Portantino, who's very familiar to the Armenian American community. He serves as he has served as a retired state assembly member. He serves as a professor with the University of Southern California, a visiting fellow professor, and he serves on the board of the Pasadena Armenian Genocide Memorial Committee. Each panelist with their respective backgrounds and experience dealing with the Armenian community, the Armenian genocide, and all that the Armenian genocide and the Armenian cause stands for. Each one will present their views, their perspectives, and their experiences with this uphill battle that has been going on for nearly a century, for 90 years now. Without further ado, I would like to ask for your undivided attention and your strong focus because of the abundance of information that you will receive tonight. I ask for your undivided attention as we move the platform over to our forum and our forum members to continue on with the discussion. We'd like to begin with the history and historical accounts of the Armenian genocide with Georg Nazarian.
Thank you, David. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to the organizers for putting this important event together. This is really important to educate ourselves, to know the details. A lot of us are activists who take part in the rallies and different ways of expressing our political activism, but I think it's important to know the details when it comes to the Armenian genocide, because it was such a horrendous event, or any genocide for that matter, as Barbara would tell you. Basically, the Armenian genocide is considered the first modern genocide by most genocide scholars. It set a very negative precedent because that was the first time that a modern state planned and executed a mass extermination of a people based on race, religion, or anything that they deemed unworthy, and organized something like that on a mass scale when a government is actually has a plan that is systematically implemented. The Armenian genocide began after a reactionary force took over Turkey known as the Young Turks. It was a group calling itself revolutionary who actually basically had a coup of government in 1908. And initially, a lot of Armenians actually believed that that coup would usher in democratic reforms, equality, and so actually a lot of Armenians were optimistic when the Young Turks came to power and toppled Sultan Abdülhamid II, who was considered a reactionary. Of course, we know that Sultan himself had massacred hundreds of thousands of Armenians between 1894 and 1896. So the Armenians initially believed that the Young Turks were democratic, they were actually for democracy and equal rights. So a lot of Armenians did support the Young Turk revolution of 1908. But soon enough, especially after the Balkan War of 1912-1913, this Young Turk regime showed its true face, which was quite reactionary and in many ways racist and prejudiced. After the war of 1912-1913, after losing the possessions of the Ottoman Empire that were in the Balkans, the Young Turk regime began a reactionary policy of trying to put together and hold on to what they could. Because at this time, everyone knew that the Ottoman Empire was disintegrating, so they had this sort of band-aid approach of trying to hang on to as much as territory they can. And many genocide scholars believe that it was during this time, after the Balkan War, the Young Turk regime put a secret plan of exterminating those Christians, mainly Armenians, Greeks, Assyrians, and others, that encompassed much of Asia Minor and historic Armenia, which is Western Armenia. So that plan was secretly put together, but was not obviously implemented. But they were already pondering about extermination, about ethnic cleansing, and of course ultimately genocide. And when World War I broke out, the Young Turks actually approached Armenian leaders and told them to support them in their fight against the Allies. So Turkey joined the Central Powers, which were against the Allies, mainly made up of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman. Turkey joined as one of the key states of the Central Powers quite late. They joined in November of 1914. So the war had broken out earlier in summer of 1914. They joined late. And almost immediately, the three main leaders of the Young Turks, the three pashas, Cemal, Enver, and Talat, they already wanted to implement this policy of Turkification, because the ideology of pan-Turkism was one of the ideologies that was supposed to replace the crumbling Ottoman Empire. They tried pan-Islamism, but that did not work because the Arabs had their own nationalism, which was not in support of pan-Islamic ideology. So the alternative ideology that was adopted to save or possibly replace the Ottoman Empire, to unite all the Turkic-speaking peoples into one great, sort of like an empire called Turan, a pan-Turkish empire, was put together by these young Turk ideologues. And obviously the Armenians were the most numerous people that stood in the way of this pan-Turkish ideology. In their eyes, it was a wedge that separated Turkic-speaking peoples from each other. That was mainly the territory of present-day Turkey and territory of present-day Azerbaijan, but of course, Turkic nations beyond the Caspian Sea. So even nations to the east of the Caspian Sea, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, so on. So this grand plan was actually put together, and the reactionary policy by the Young Turk regime almost immediately was put in force. First of all, the Turks themselves, headed by Enver Pasha, one of the main organizers of the Armenian genocide, launched an invasion of Russian Empire, those territories that were Eastern Armenia, that were launched invasion of Eastern Armenia, and a major battle took place known as the Battle of Sari Hamish. In that battle, which took place in late 1914, early 1915, the Turks, Turkish Third Army, headed by Enver Pasha, lost about 100,000 soldiers due to dysentery and frostbite. So they were not prepared for this campaign. They launched the campaign. It was a humiliating defeat. Just imagine losing about 100,000 soldiers in one battle. And the scapegoat that Enver Pasha put was some Armenians that actually, as subjects of the Russian Empire, fought on behalf of Russia, which of course had nothing to do with the Ottoman Armenians, who were mostly peasants, minding their own business and living their ordinary lives. But he had to place the blame on someone, so this was a very good excuse. And Enver Pasha, once his Third Army was drawn back, immediately launched in early 1915 the already systematically planned genocide that was already in place. And along with Talat and Cemal, the architects of the Armenian genocide, it was launched. So almost immediately, starting in late 1914, early 1915, these reports began to flood the various different missions, European missions, ambassadors, diplomats. They were flooded with this information, be it through the missionaries or American missionaries who in the 19th century went to Turkey, worked a lot with the Armenians, so they were, so to speak, on the ground, so they knew what was going on. All these reports were coming back in. Henry Morgenthau, the ambassador to Turkey between 1913 and 1916, was basically flooded with these reports of mass killings of Armenians all over the Ottoman Empire. And he just telegram after telegram to the State Department telling that a race murder is taking place in the Ottoman Empire. Armenians are being exterminated, and we have to realize that the word genocide was not coined during this time. So race murder and crimes against humanity, as allies called it, was terms that were used. Raphael Lemkin, who was born in 1900, who was a teenager during this time, who coined the term genocide, later recalled and said that he was just taken aback by all those reports, and he remembered as youth reading all these stories coming out in the New York Times and other European leading newspapers of Armenians being murdered en masse. And when he coined the term in 1943, he actually said that the Armenian genocide is a textbook case of a genocide, corresponding to the definition that he coined the term genocide. So he specifically said that, and of course his report was submitted to the United Nations and formed the United Nations report on prevention of genocide and condemnation of genocide in 1948. And President Harry Truman actually at that time also said that the Armenian genocide is a classic case of a genocide. He was a supporter of that UN resolution.
So was he the second? Was he the second president who acknowledged that?
Yes, but he was the first to use the word genocide, which was immediately, basically right after it was coined by Raphael Lemkin, he used it. So President Harry Truman used the word genocide, and so have many presidents after that have used the word genocide. President Carter, President Reagan has used it. So the genocide was recognized on so many levels during that time, and I think it's important for us to realize that we're fighting for reaffirmation of the genocide, because it has been recognized many times. During that time, the President of the United States was Woodrow Wilson, who was a great champion of human rights, democracy, and he actually made very important statement in 1918, part of his 18 points. He noted that the Armenian people have suffered horrendous mass killing, and the Declaration of 14 Points included a point about Armenian autonomy. So President Woodrow Wilson, as early as January of 1918, in his 14 points said that the Armenian people have to have their own homeland, have a right to an autonomous development, and this would eventually become the arbitrary award of President Woodrow Wilson, which included the 4 historic vilayets of the Ottoman Empire, along with the territories of Eastern Armenia that were within formerly Russian Empire. And that arbitrary award was made after this Treaty of Sevres of August 10, 1920, and was signed, and he put the Great Seal of the President of the United States on November 22nd, 1920. And that's, of course, a binding arbitrary award. It's still in force, the arbitrary award of President Woodrow Wilson. It was the Allies agreed that the President of the United States is the one that will make that arbitrary award. So, but returning to the extermination of the Armenian people, the Young Turk regime created extermination units known as the Special Organization, which was tasked with rounding up Armenians all over the Ottoman Empire and basically driving them to these extermination centers where they were killed en masse in these concentration areas. You can see the map if you have a chance. If you haven't seen it, it's very well done. It shows these centers. And what is also very important to realize that the Young Turks, when they had a chance to invade the territory of Russian Empire and even Persia, which later on, of course, was known as Iran, they also exterminated Armenians there as well. So it is important to realize that the plan of the Young Turks, this pan-Turkish plan, was carried over to other parts, even beyond the Ottoman Empire. And this plan of extermination of Armenians wherever they could get hold of them was carried out all the way to Baku. And at this time, Enver Pasha was the one with several other Young Turk leaders who also organized the invasion of Baku, where 30,000 Armenians were slaughtered there as well in September of 1918. Another important point to keep in mind is that the Kemal Atatürk, the founder of modern Republic of Turkey, was himself a Young Turk, and later on, during his Kemalist forces, also continued the genocide. The Armenians of Smyrna were killed in September of 1922 by the Kemalists, and also after their invasion of the Republic of Armenia, they killed off a lot of Armenians in Kars, in Ardahan. Before that, the Armenians of Batum were exterminated by the Kemalists. So the founder of the Republic of Turkey, Kemal Atatürk himself and his forces and the Republic of Turkey is also took part in the extermination of the Armenian people, and they're part in the Armenian genocide as well. That's just some of the arguments that are presented by some Turkish officials that it's something that has to do with the Ottoman Empire. It's not correct, because the Republic of Turkey was basically founded on the genocide of the Armenians, of Greeks, of the Assyrians. So in this regard, it is also important for us to remember that when we hold Turkey responsible, the present Turkish government is implicit, and it also is responsible for the Armenian genocide, no matter how you look at it. And it's very important to keep that in mind. And of course, one can say so much, but we're limited on time. So maybe if you have other questions, I can answer.
I actually have a question, but
Sure.
just one word answer, if you can, Mr. Nazarian. So you're talking about the Wilsonian territory sign. Does that include Mount Ararat in that region?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. The symbol of Armenia.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nazarian, thank you.